Hey guys, my name is Chelsea and welcome back to my channel. For today's video, we have my August wrap-up. So I read a total of 15 books in August and I'm actually very happy with that. Last month I read like 20 something, but that's because I read like a whole 10 volume manga series. So this is actually pretty on par with what I've been reading this year, and I'm actually quite happy to talk about most of these things here. I did end up doing the Diversify That Shelf readathon this month as well. I will leave the vlog linked down below. And because of that, there are some books that I'm going to be talking about that I got into in more depth in that vlog. So those ones, I will let you know which ones they are, but I'm going to try not to dwell on them too much so that this video isn't super long. So besides that, let's jump right on in. The first book that I read in the month of August is All Systems Red by Martha Wells. This is the first book in the Murderbot series that I had been hearing nothing but good things about. I had never really heard of it before this year when I think the 5th book came out, and so I think the hype just surrounding that 5th book is what made the series come onto my radar. It was, like I said, not something that I had really heard about before. It is a Tor novella for this first book, so it is quite short. However, I absolutely loved it. 5 out of 5 stars. I am hit or miss with novellas. I feel like sometimes you're just wanting, or at least me personally, I'm wanting more world building, more character building, something. However, I really enjoyed this one. It follows our main character of Murderbot, who that is what they call themselves. I don't think there's a specific gender stated for Murderbot. I have heard quite a few people say that they see them either as female or see them as male. I did sort of see them as female, but I don't know if that's because I'm female, so I'm going to try and use they, them pronouns because I don't think they identified specifically themselves. But they are an augmented human cyborg. I don't think they're just like an AI robot. I do think they have some human parts is what they were talking about. However, they are not exactly human either. One thing that I did really enjoy about Murderbot is the way that they sort of see themselves in the world, and one of the things specifically, Murderbot does talk about how they don't have genitals, basically, because they are not a bot that is for like the pleasure side of things. So even though Murderbot is part robot, I don't fully know, they're at least asexual, and it is something that I just found very intriguing. And basically Murderbot is on a planet and has been hired sort of like security to take care of this like scientific team, and things start to go wrong. I just loved it so much. It's hard to explain exactly what happened because even though it is only just over like 100 and something pages, I feel like quite a bit did happen. There was, you know, world building, but it wasn't like too much world building because we didn't really know much about the world they're on, and we're learning it as Murderbot does. We're learning it as the scientists do as well. But obviously in general we have overall world building of this sort of like galactic area where obviously there are humanoid robots. I don't know how to describe it, but I really loved it. I love the pacing of it. I love the writing style, and I have more novellas on my Kindle app, so I'm gonna end up picking them up pretty darn soon. I'm loving sci-fi right now, and this was a great start to the month. The next book that I read was Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. This is the 4th book that Riley Sager has written, however, the 3rd book that I have read by them. I have not read Lock Every Door yet. That's the only one that I'm missing from him. But this is my favorite so far. I gave Final Girls and The Last Time I Lied both 4 stars, and I gave this one a 5 stars. This, I don't know if it was the setting of like some sort of like spooky haunted house. We're trying to figure out what's going on. Basically, our main character of Maggie ends up inheriting this house that her father had owned after he passes away, and during her childhood and her lifetime, her father wrote a book about this house, and it was like a true ghost story. So throughout the book, we actually have like alternating chapters of the father's book and Maggie in the current day in the house. She's basically trying to like renovate it to sell it, and it was so well done. I know Riley Sager does this a lot where he has alternating chapters, usually from the past and then the present, but the fact that the past was a ghost story basically that the father had written was very intriguing, especially since Maggie does not remember what happened at that time when they were in this house. I think they were only there for like a couple weeks. I loved it. I did sort of guess the twist, but one thing that Riley Sager does really well, and I think really well, especially in this one, is he does give you the twist that you're sort of expecting, but then there's like 3 more twists after it, and it was a wild ride. I absolutely love this one. I think this is my favorite one from him, and actually one of my favorite like contemporary thriller type of books. It was amazing. The next book I read was Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer. This was a book I had pre-ordered months and months ago. I don't even remember exactly when. I did get it on sale, and I just wanted to say, I did mention this in my book haul as well, I did actually end up donating to the Quileute tribe as well. I will leave the link for it down below. I donated basically the price of this book, $30, just because they are trying to get out of a tsunami zone, and Stephanie Meyer and her publishers, from everything that we can tell, have not donated to people that they use in their books as characters and a tribe, and these are real people. Let's get to the book, shall we? I gave this 2.5 stars. For most of this book, was giving it 2 stars. Near the end, I wanted to give it 3. It's a 3 on Goodreads. I'm going to have to go in and like give little details and stuff like that. 1, this book is huge. Way bigger than it needs to be. Edward goes on way too long. He is very long-winded. A lot of this stuff obviously we got in Twilight, but from Bella's point of view. I actually was one of those people that had read the partial Midnight Sun that she put on her website way back in the day once it had gotten leaked and everything, and so some of the stuff in here that I had seen people being like, oh, it's a revelation, I remembered that. It wasn't necessarily that was the part that was wrong or annoying or anything like that. He was just so very long-winded. There were some times where he goes into these like flashbacks and memories and like what happened in the past, and it would just be so long that I didn't care. Like, I didn't care for that. I just wanted the action and everything to keep moving. Now, once we actually got to the baseball scene here in the book, I don't know how long it took us to get there, but once we got there, that part to the end I really enjoyed. I actually think I liked this book better because we got to see Alice and Alice's powers better. I liked seeing some of those other characters that Bella doesn't actually get to see very much, and seeing how it works with Edward, hearing their thoughts and like all that kind of stuff, like the different vampire stuff and like what happened after the baseball scene. That was the most interesting part. This is one of those series where I have a lot of nostalgia for the actual first series. I remember reading them when they first came out. We would pass them around school. Almost every single person, girl or guy, was reading Twilight when I was a junior in high school. That was just like when it was. I think Twilight and New Moon was around that time sometime. And there are some things that are very problematic, and I know I am just one person, and that's part of the reason I wanted to donate. I wanted to help real people more than like nostalgia, but I had to read it. I feel like a lot of people have felt that sort of I need to know because it's been so long. However, I just don't think this book really hit that nostalgia I had. I personally like Bella's point of view better. It's much easier to read, it's much easier to get through, it was a lot quicker. Yes, I can understand that the writing style has gotten a little bit better, but Edward himself is not it. Now we're going to be starting with the books that I read during the Diversify That Shelf readathon. I did end up picking up A Prince on Paper by Alyssa Cole. This is the third novel in the Reluctant Royal series. There's a couple novellas that I haven't read yet, but this is like the last big novel, and I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. I think I gave the last book in the series 4 out of 5 stars as well. This does fulfill one of my 52 reading challenges prompts that I was doing, which is to read a book with a dress on the cover. As we can see here, Nia has a very pretty dress, and the reason I gave this 4 stars is I feel like the romance was not as well done as the second book in the series, which was Portia's book. There were a lot of elements in here I liked. We had like a fake engagement sort of trope. We did see a lot of their family elements, so both Nia's family and Johan's family, and I really did like Johan's point of view as well. I don't always like male points of views in romance. It really just depends on the guy. But I did really like the characters in here. However, the actual romantic elements I feel like weren't as well done and didn't come together as well as some of Alyssa Cole's other books, mostly just because these two characters knew each other before the start of this third book, and they sort of had crushes on each other but weren't telling each other about it, and then they had the fake engagement thing. So it was just a slightly different dynamic that I don't think worked as well. I wasn't swooning as much as I was wanting to, but I did like the familial aspects, and so I feel like this maybe was just more contemporary story than romance story, but still a good 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read for the Diversify That Shelf readathon was Wilder Girls by Rory Power. I don't have the physical copy of this book anymore because I actually did end up unhauling it and selling it on Depop, so that is why it's no longer here. I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. It wasn't necessarily that it was bad. I did like it slightly more than Burn Our Bodies Down by Rory Power, which I read earlier this year, but I think Rory Power and I just don't quite mesh with the writing style and the fact that we don't really get answers throughout her books. You get some answers, but not a lot of answers. Also, it is supposed to be like a body horror sort of book, and I wanted it to push that envelope a little bit more. We did get the sapphic female-female romance sort of elements that I did actually really appreciate. So again, 3 stars, not bad. I just wanted more from it. Then I also read Chilling Effect by Valerie Valdez, another one for the Diversify That Shelf readathon, and this one fulfilled a prompt to read a book without a dust jacket. Obviously, it's a paperback, no dust jacket. And I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this one. It just didn't have that like oomph to give it a 5 stars, but this is an Own Voices Cuban-American author with a Cuban-American protagonist that is in a sci-fi. This is compared to Firefly and Mass Effect, and let me tell you, I definitely felt the Mass Effect vibes in here. We definitely have, you know, aliens on the crew. There's somebody that's reminding me of Garrus quite a lot. Like, there was a lot of things to love about this, and I've already pre-ordered the sequel, which is coming out on September 8th. But a lot of this is sort of episodic, almost like missions. She has to go on these like certain missions for a seedy crime lord to help save her sister who has been like kidnapped. I think they put her in like cryo because I think it's called the Fridge, if I'm remembering correctly. The Fridge is like the crime mob thing that took her sister, and so she's basically going on these missions to try to, you know, help save her sister. I really did like this one. However, some of those missions felt like it didn't quite meld together with an overall plot line, even though the plot line is to save her sister. By the time we got to the climax and everything, it just felt like I liked the missions a lot, but it didn't feel like it had a one cohesive storyline. But I'm very curious to see about the sequel. Again, I love this cover, and we did have psychic cats. They didn't do too much in the story, but I like the fact that they were there and they were included. Then I also read I'll Be the One by Lila Lee. This one I gave 5 out of 5 stars. This is my favorite book of the month, I'm pretty darn sure. It was so well done. So Lila Lee is a Korean author, and our main character here is Sky, who is Korean American, and she's trying out for a like K-pop competition show to, I think, win to go to Korea to like see the K-pop industry. but she is fat. She is plus sized, and so she does have to deal with a lot of fat phobia in here. One, from the people in the competition, like the judges and that kind of stuff, but also from her own mother. She's also bi, so we had a lot of representation in here. I absolutely loved Sky. I loved her like friendship with some of the girls that were in the competition. I loved the writing style. This actually made me tear up, I think like 4 times. It was just such a well done book. It does have those hard topics in it, but I think it's absolutely worth it. Then I also read Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. This, again, I gave 5 stars. Probably like my second favorite one of the month, maybe. It's another romance. This one is an adult romance, and I absolutely loved it. Again, this is part of the Diversify That Shelf Readathon. The last few books have been. I talk about it more in that vlog, but I just really loved it. So basically our main character of Chloe Brown has fibromyalgia, and after a near-death experience, she realizes that she wants to get a life and sort of get out more, do things that she wants to do or what she thinks life is supposed to be like without, you know, people babying her like some of her family does. So one of the first things she does is move out to a new apartment, and there we have Red, who is her superintendent. I actually loved reading from both of their points of view. This writing style, again, was just so easy to read, so well done. I actually devoured this in one day, basically 2 sittings total, I think. Really enjoyed it. Someone woke up from his nap. We were trying to do all this before he woke up. Didn't quite work, but we only have 7 books left. We're more than halfway done, so I think we're just gonna try and get through this. So the next book and the last book I read for the Diversify That Shelf Readathon was A Quiet Kind of Thunder by Sarah Barnard. This is a very shiny book, but this one definitely I also really enjoyed. 4 out of 5 stars, because it just didn't have that like oomph for whatever reason that I wanted. And I don't even know what that oomph would be, but this follows our main character of Steffi, who is selective mute based on, I think it was anxiety, introversion, and shyness. She has therapists that she goes and sees. She's trying out a new anti-anxiety medication, and there is a new boy at school named Reese who is deaf, and because she knows a little bit of British Sign Language, she sort of gets introduced to him and is like, take him around school. They end up becoming friends and having a little bit of romance, because this is a YA contemporary romance, and I really loved the way that their disabilities were put into here. I love the fact that even though they did end up having some sort of romance, it was never used as a now she's all better, because obviously his deafness is not going to be like cured, but a lot of this is her trying to, you know, live with her selective muteness, trying to come out of her shell more, seeing if those anti-anxiety meds will work. And I liked that there was no easy solution here. It was, again, hard-hitting, but like also very cute, and I really enjoyed it. The next book that I read was a NetGalley e-arc of Scritch Scratch by Lindsay Curry. This book is actually out today, September 1st. It is a middle grade horror novel that I gave 3.5 stars. I really did like the beginning of this book. Basically, our main character is Claire, who is a scientist, but her dad owns a Chicago bus tour. I'm having a really hard time saying that, but like a ghost tour. So he's all about like the supernatural and all this kind of stuff, and she is very much not. But one day when his like bus driver gets sick, he has to drive the bus, and she has to help out with like taking tickets, that kind of stuff. And at the end of the tour, there is a little ghost boy in the back of the bus who ends up following her home and, you know, scritching, scratching on the walls. So I really did enjoy the beginning of this story and the actual like ghosty elements, that kind of stuff. I loved Claire and her best friend trying to work through their stuff. I think they're in middle school, and so they were, you know, dealing with other friends and growing up, that kind of stuff. I also loved Claire and her brother's dynamic. The actual like characters in here were pretty well done. However, the scientist aspect of Claire didn't quite work for me, because we are told multiple times that she is a scientist, but she never really shows us in her actions She tells us a lot that she likes the science fair. They do use the scientific method once or twice to figure out what's going on with the ghost, but besides that, she doesn't ever act like a scientist besides telling us that. Also, after we get about halfway through the book, it stops really being a horror, turns in more of a mystery, her trying to be more of like a detective sort of thing, and I did like it well enough. The writing style was great. I want to check out more of Lindsay Curry's work, but I think I was expecting more of a horror, more of a ghost paranormal story, I guess I should say, based on what NetGalley was selling it as, what the publisher was selling it as, and so it just fell a little bit short. The next book I read was Become You by Ichigo Takano. So this is the same author as Orange and Dreamin' Sun, and this is the newest volume from her. This came out, I want to say last year, but I think the second volume of this is not coming out until next year. So we have a long wait for it, but you pooping? I really did enjoy it. I actually gave this 5 out of 5 stars. We follow our main character of Tayu, who wants to be a musician. He's in high school, but he wants to work more on performing for people, learning the guitar, because he's not very good at it. So he ends up roping in Hikari into his sort of like plan, who used to play piano at the school. And so this is a lot of these two boys trying to figure out who they are, who they want to be, the art, the music that they want to create. And I really love the friendship. I really love the way that this was told. I'm a little sad that the volume 2 is not out yet, and it was actually a quite pleasant surprise for this volume because of the fact that I didn't quite like how Dreaming Sun ended, but I want more in this series. Is that your head? Then the next book that I read was Hope Volume 1 Mother by Dirk Manning and Kaylin Smith. This one also fulfilled a prompt to read a book with a number in the title. I did cheat a little bit and went volume 1, but it was something that I really wanted to read. This is a graphic novel because of the fact that none of these came out as comic issues, about superheroes, but not quite in the way you would expect. Basically, our main character here is Hope, aka Julie, who comes out as Hope, or gets outed as Hope, after a car accident. And the whole book is basically revolving around whether or not she is a fit mother for her child, because she never told her child or her husband that she was a superhero. It has very tough topics, but I absolutely love the fact that it wasn't just a superhero saving the day sort of story. It deals with the life of what this one superhero is having to deal with. She is basically now being set an example of for other superheroes. The ending of this first volume had a twist I did not see coming, but I'm very excited for the second one. I did end up getting this off of Kickstarter, so I think they're gonna have to do a second Kickstarter for volume 2 soon. Hopefully soon, because I really did enjoy this one. Then the next book that I read was another NetGalley e-arc, and that was For the Ghost Tree by Christina Henry. This book is coming out on September 8th. This one is, I believe it's supposed to be an adult horror story. The main character is a girl named Lauren who is 14, even though we do have multiple different points of view in this story. But I believe with how the topics and everything are in this story, the content in this story, it is probably not young adults. I could be wrong. I think it's supposed to be horror. Christina Henry is usually a horror author. I gave this book 2 stars. I just really did not like it. They did have some horror aspects, some gore aspects, and those ones were fine. However, the people in this story, the characters in this story, basically none of them were likable, and I almost DNF'd it, but it was quite an easy read. The actual like writing style and everything of it was very easy to read, so I did push through and finish. The last 10% I want to say was actually really good. That's when like the action amped up, but it was the last 10% of like a 400-ish page book. So basically, yeah, our main characters, none of them were things that I liked. Our main character of Lauren is a 14-year-old who's sort of a brat. Her best friend Miranda is 15, also sort of a brat, but she's very focused on losing her virginity, going so far as to say that her hymen is in the way and that the adult that she is trying to seduce, I don't want to get into that really, is going to know she's a virgin because her virginity is in the way. Like, it's just the way that the author had her characters speak about certain topics rubbed me the wrong way. This is supposed to be set in 1985, I believe it is. So, I mean, some things are period and then some things are just wrong. We also had a very, very racist old lady who I can understand, yeah, some people are racist, but the fact that we had multiple times in her head from her point of view, I did not appreciate that very much. We also had a mother who kept comparing her teenage daughter to her 4-year-old son and complaining that her daughter was like horrible, the son was perfect, and she was just always comparing them. And I could not stand any of the people. So by the time the action happened, I didn't care as much. Although the last 10%, like I said, the action stuff was pretty darn good. Another NetGalley e-arc that I read was An Unnatural Life by Erin K. Wagner. This is a Tor novella, and it will be coming out on September 15th. This one I gave 4 out of 5 stars. It actually was pretty well done. They say that it is a combination of Murderbot and To Kill a Mockingbird. I think the Murderbot connection is mostly because Murderbot got very, very popular this year, and Murderbot, like I mentioned before in this video, is more of a like half robot, half human sort of thing. The robot, the AI in An Unnatural Life, is an AI. It is not a human at all. Basically, they are convicted of a crime, a murder of a human, and Aya, who is our main human character, is going to try and appeal this because of the fact that the AI, or I think they also call them Robotnik, is like, instead of humans, they're Robotnik. They're not necessarily equal. And it definitely raised a few questions that I thought were very, very interesting, and I did like reading from it. However, I feel like there was a lot of world building that might have happened behind the scenes that we didn't get enough of. Like, I really, really wish this was a longer book that we got more out of. And then there were interludes in between each chapter of something that didn't pertain to the chapter or the book at all. And I'm curious about those because they seemed very, very interesting. But there was no answer to that. We did get a conclusion for the actual main story, but because it is a Tor novella, it was like 150, 160 pages. It went by very, very quickly, and I wanted more, that like oomph that I feel like pushes a book into a 5 stars. But I do feel like it was a very interesting read. And then the last book that I ended up reading in August was The Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wong. This book did also fulfill a prompt, which was to read a book over 600 pages, and it is like 651, I believe it is. Don't hate me, because every single person that I'm friends with through BookTube and everything like that that has actually read The Sword of Kaigen gave it 5 stars. I'm giving it 3 stars. This is another book that I really, really, really wanted to DNF. However, because I appreciate their points of view and I really wanted to know what they saw in this book, I kept reading. I feel like, one, this book was way too long. Like I said, it's like 651 pages. And I feel like it could have been split very, very easily into like 3 distinct books and then improved upon, given us more. Basically, we have 2 main characters. We have Misaki, who is a mother of 4 boys. She's like in her 30s. And then we also have her eldest son, Mamoru, who is 14. And this is a war story, so it is going to have very heavy topics. There were trigger warnings for miscarriage and war, so deaths, rape. There's a lot of stuff in here. But I feel like the length of it was a detriment, at least to me personally. The chapters were very, very long. I read this on my Kindle app, and there were some chapters that were like 45 minutes of reading long. It was just too much. We got points of view from Misaki that were both in the present day when she's a 30-something-year-old mother, but also flashback points of view when she was around 14 or 15 in a school and in a different country. And I feel like that was my favorite part, was that sort of part of her life, and I really wish that would have been a separate book. And then her current day life could have been a separate book, and then Mamoru's stuff could have been a separate book. Another thing, just because it was so long, they did get to the war aspects, and the parts that were actually the war were interesting, but once that was done and it felt like we reached a conclusion, it kept going. I feel like that was just not for me. Also, I did not feel myself connect to really any of the characters. Misaki a little bit more than others, but I think this was just not my type of book. I completely can see why people do like it, but because of those issues I personally had, I couldn't enjoy it as much as other people. I do still think it was good in some aspects. So 3 out of 5 stars. It was just not really for me, and I'm very sorry. Okay. That's it for me. This kiddo, like I said before, woke up from his nap. I think he's gonna need a snack soon, so we're gonna go. If you guys like this video, give it a thumbs up to let me know. Subscribe to this channel if you would like to see more videos. I do have videos up Mondays, Thursdays, and sometimes Saturdays, so I will see you then. Bye!